I just don't want you in the pictures, Grandma. You're not really the aesthetic we're going for." That's what she said, word for word, standing there in my doorway with her gown still wrapped in a clear plastic bag and her cheeks glowing from excitement. She didn't even meet my eyes when she said it, just looked over my shoulder into the hallway, as if already thinking about the friends who would be waiting for her. I was holding a little gift bag at the time, navy blue, with tissue paper that matched her dress. I'd stayed up the night before, sewing a delicate handkerchief with her initials. A small tradition, something my mother had done for me when I was 17. I didn't say anything. I nodded. That's always been my way. The porch door closed behind her, and I just stood there a moment longer, still holding the bag, the tissue fluttering in the breeze like a flag raised for surrender. Then I set it down on the hallway table and went upstairs to change. The dress I'd bought, a pale lilac tea dress with short sleeves and tiny buttons up the front, was still hanging on my closet door. I'd ironed it that morning. I didn't have many reasons to dress up these days, but I had wanted to look nice for Olivia, just nice enough not to embarrass her. I'd even gone out of my way to buy low-heeled shoes in a shade that matched the little clutch I still had from Eleanor's wedding in '92. I put the dress on anyway. I wasn't sure why. I knew I wasn't welcome. But there was something in me that couldn't just sit at home with my knitting, pretending it didn't matter. They were taking the prom pictures at Ridgeview Park, near the West Fountain. I knew the place. I'd taken Olivia there for years. When she was 5, she used to call it the Fairy Garden. There was a willow tree there, not too far from the benches, with long green arms that reached the ground and made a kind of hiding place inside. That's where I went. I parked on the opposite side of the park and walked across the lawn slowly, careful with the grass that was still damp from the morning sprinklers. My knees protested with each step, but I didn't mind. I wasn't there to chase anyone, just to see her, just to be near. I found the willow tree and stepped inside. It felt childish, maybe, hiding like that. But it also felt safe. From the shadows, I watched them arrive, all gloss and sparkle and the excitement of 18-year-olds who think the world has finally opened its gates. Olivia looked beautiful, of course. Dark green satin and a little silver clutch, her hair in soft curls. She posed with friends, laughed, adjusted someone's corsage. She looked like someone I used to know, but only barely. At one point, her mother, my daughter, arrived. Cassandra. Still pretending not to be 48, still talking with that clipped, hurried tone she uses when she wants to seem important. I saw her point toward the group, giving instructions to the photographer. I used to take pictures like that, on a disposable Kodak, before we could check if anyone had blinked. There were parents scattered around, some in heels, some in jeans. Some stood back. Others ran up for selfies. No one looked twice at the willow, and I just stood there, watching, hands clasped in front of me like in church. I didn't cry. I haven't cried in years, not properly, but my throat was sore the way it gets when you want to. I remembered holding Olivia the day she was born, Cassandra too exhausted to care that I'd taken her in my arms first. She was so tiny, with her father's mouth in my eyes. I remembered reading her Goodnight Moon every night for 3 years, until she declared she was too big for bedtime stories. I remembered patching her jacket when she scraped it on the playground, and the time we spent hours baking cupcakes for her 3rd-grade class because Cassandra had forgotten to sign up. I remembered being needed. Not wanted, maybe, but needed. Now I was hidden behind a tree. At some point, Olivia pulled out her phone and began posing for individual shots, leaning against the old iron lamppost, sitting on the edge of the fountain, tilting her head just so. The photographer adjusted her dress, told her to think serene but confident, and Olivia laughed. That sound. It used to be mine. I used to be the one who made her laugh like that. And yet there I was, unseen, unwelcome, not aesthetic enough. The photo shoot didn't last much longer. Parents began gathering coats, boys tugged off their jackets, girls rechecked their lipstick. Someone's mother brought out a cooler with canned drinks. I stayed where I was, and then Olivia turned in my direction. For a brief second, I thought she'd seen me. I almost stepped out. But she didn't. She just tossed her head toward her friend and walked away, laughing. The others followed. Cassandra waved goodbye and headed back to her car. Just like that, the day was over. I stayed a few more minutes, just long enough for the park to go quiet again. Then I stepped out from under the willow, brushed the grass from my hem, and walked slowly back to the car. I didn't look back. There was nothing there for me anymore. The kitchen smelled like old toast and lemon detergent when I got back home. I left the lights off, not wanting to see the room too clearly. I just dropped my purse on the counter and slid out of my shoes, letting them fall where they may. My feet ached, but it was the ache of disappointment more than age. I made tea out of habit, peppermint, no sugar. I didn't even want it really, but I couldn't just stand there, doing nothing. The silence in the house pressed in like a thick wool blanket. For a moment, I thought of turning on the radio, maybe finding one of those golden oldie stations. But it felt dishonest somehow, like I was trying to drown out something that had to be heard. My eyes fell on the little gift bag, still on the hall table where I'd left it. The tissue paper had wilted a bit from the humidity. I picked it up and carried it to the kitchen table, sitting slowly. My knees always creaked this time of day. I pulled out the handkerchief, soft cotton, pale blue, with the initials OM, stitched in silver thread. I had sewn them carefully. It had taken 3 tries to get the curves of the O just right. I folded the handkerchief and placed it back inside the bag. She wouldn't want it now. Not that she ever really wanted anything from me, not anymore. Unless it was something that didn't show. A ride to the orthodontist, a loan for a new phone, a signature on a permission form when Cassandra was too slammed with meetings. I was useful when I was invisible, not when I stood out. Certainly not when I showed up in a dress that wasn't aesthetic. I took a sip of the tea and grimaced. Bitter. Everything was bitter tonight. I stood up and walked into the living room. The photos on the mantel looked back at me. Cassandra, at 10, with a missing front tooth. Me and Charles, my late husband, in our wedding photo, the one we had to pose for 3 times because I kept blinking. And in the middle, Olivia as a baby, in a yellow bonnet, asleep in my arms. I reached up and turned the frame around. Somehow, I needed to put space between that memory and today. I used to think this house was warm, safe, the kind of place where you could smell supper before you opened the door, where people wiped their shoes without being told. But lately, it felt like a museum. Clean, quiet, and mostly empty. When Charles died 9 years ago, Cassandra and Olivia moved in for a while. "Just until we get back on our feet," she'd said. "I'll help with the mortgage, Mom, promise." They stayed for 6 years. I never asked for rent. I never once brought up the rising grocery bills, or the piles of laundry, or the way my quiet afternoons vanished. I cooked. I babysat. I fixed school lunches. And when Cassandra moved out, into a bright new condo with gray walls and glass everything, she took Olivia and left behind only silence. She visits now and then. Usually when she needs something notarized or wants me to check in on the plumber. She brings coffee and talks like we're old co-workers. I nod a lot. I've gotten good at nodding. And Olivia? She hugs me politely, asks me if I've seen that new show she likes, then retreats to her phone even while I'm answering. I used to think that was just teenagers, that they'd grow out of it. Now I'm not so sure. The kettle let out a low hiss again. I'd forgotten to turn it off. As I crossed the kitchen, my toe hit the leg of the chair, and I let out a sharp breath. Pain shot up, quick and mean. I gripped the counter until it passed. That's the thing no one warns you about. How your body starts playing tricks, just when you most need to look like you've got it together. That's probably what Olivia meant. Not aesthetic enough, not graceful, not glossy, not photo-worthy. I turned off the stove and dumped the tea. Enough of that. It was almost dark outside, the sky a dusky purple, and the neighbor's porch light had just flicked on. I closed the blinds, then paused, looking at my reflection in the glass. Hair gray but still thick. Eyes tired but still clear. Face lined, yes, but not harsh. I didn't look like a monster. I looked like someone who'd lived, who had spent decades holding up other people's lives, and now stood alone. Maybe that was the part Olivia didn't want in her pictures. But I wasn't ashamed. Not anymore. The next morning, I found the gift bag still on the table. The blue tissue paper had slumped, one edge stained with yesterday's tea ring. I stared at it for a long time. Then I opened it again, took out the handkerchief, and folded it slowly into thirds. It wouldn't go to waste. I had someone else in mind. Down the street, 3 houses over, lives a girl named Jada. Her grandmother, Hazel, and I talk from time to time over the fence. Jada's a senior too. Quiet, thoughtful, not the kind of girl who posts outfit hauls online or demands her grandma hide behind trees. Last year, she came by my porch after school to return a book I'd lent Hazel. She called me ma'am, and when I offered her cookies, she didn't pretend to be too busy to sit down. I wrapped the handkerchief in plain brown paper and walked it over to Hazel's later that morning. She was out on the porch, watering her lavender pots. "Got something for Jada," I said, holding it out. Hazel raised her eyebrows but took it without fuss. "You all right?" I shrugged. "Fine." She nodded slowly, understanding more than I'd said. That's the gift of women like us. We don't need the whole story to recognize hurt. "Come in. I've got lemon scones cooling." I stayed for half an hour. We didn't talk about Olivia, not directly. But Hazel told me Jada was skipping the big group photo shoot. Said she'd rather take a picture in the backyard with her cat. "Ain't no wrong way to show you've made it," Hazel said, her hands steady on the teapot. "Especially not for a girl who made it with her head on straight." I thought about that as I walked back home. I'd spent so long framing everything I did around what other people needed. Cassandra's schedules, Olivia's moods. I even cut my own birthday cake last year because they were stuck in traffic. But the house didn't feel like theirs anymore, and it certainly didn't feel like mine. In the afternoon, I pulled out my old checkbook. I hadn't used it in months. Cassandra set up online banking for me, insisted it was easier. But I liked the feel of real pages, the neatness of ink. I went through old statements first, printed copies in a faded folder labeled Family. There were pages of them, Olivia's orthodontics, Cassandra's car repairs, an emergency plane ticket to visit her college friend in Miami. I paid the deposit on Olivia's prom dress back in March. She never mentioned it. Just left the receipt crumpled in the kitchen drawer. I didn't make a scene. I didn't ask for thank yous. But I remembered. My mother always said gratitude wasn't something you asked for. It was something decent people offered freely. Apparently, decency had become outdated. I flipped to the last page of my checkbook and stared at the balance. Enough. More than enough. I had Charles to thank for that, and decades of making do. I picked up a pen and wrote a new check. Not for Cassandra, not for Olivia. I made it out to the Ridgeview Community Library. I'd volunteered there before, helped them run a summer reading program until my back gave out, and they politely suggested I enjoy retirement. This check wasn't for books. It was for a new scholarship. A small one, but enough to make a difference for a girl who wanted to study literature, education, maybe even library science. Someone who saw value in words, not just filters. I tucked the check into an envelope and sealed it. Then I called the library, asked for Mrs. Penner, and told her I'd like to stop by the next day. She sounded surprised, but warm. That evening, I sat on the back porch with a blanket over my legs and watched the sun slip behind the neighbor's shed. Birds chirped their closing notes, and the air turned still. I didn't think about Olivia's banquet, or the way she'd looked past me in the park. I thought about the quiet shelf of YA novels I'd once loved, about the girl who might now reach for them. Some gifts don't come with ribbons. Some photos never get taken. And some legacies are built in silence. Hazel knocked on my door the next morning without calling first, holding a brown paper bag and a look that said she wasn't leaving without a conversation. "Banana bread," she announced, walking past me before I could say a word. "Still warm? You've looked like you needed something warm." I followed her into the kitchen, grateful and slightly embarrassed. The house smelled faintly of furniture polish and yesterday's rain. Hazel moved like a woman who'd stopped apologizing for her presence years ago. She put the bread on the counter and opened the cupboards like she'd done it 100 times. "Where's your teapot?" she asked. "Top right," I said, sitting down. "You're the first guest I've had in weeks." "Well," Hazel replied, placing 2 mugs on the table. "People don't always knock on doors they're used to pushing through." That landed deeper than I expected. We sat in the kitchen, steam rising between us, the banana bread too hot to slice just yet. She didn't ask about Olivia, not directly. She just said, "Jada loved the handkerchief, by the way." Said it was the prettiest thing she'd ever held that wasn't made in a factory. I smiled at that, a small, slow curve of the lips that surprised even me. "I'm glad." Hazel took a sip of tea and studied me over the rim of her mug. "You know, the older I get, the less patience I have for pretty lies, the kind people tell just to smooth things over." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. "I saw you walking back from the park the other day," she said. "You had that look, the one women get when they've been reminded they're no longer needed." That was the first time I felt my eyes sting since the photo shoot. "I'm fine," I said. "Just tired." Hazel nodded. Tired's the word we use when we're grieving something we can't quite name. I looked down at the table. The banana bread had sunk a little in the middle. I pressed the back of my spoon into the soft spot. "It wasn't supposed to feel like this," I said quietly. "Getting older. I thought there'd be more reverence, I suppose. More earned peace." Hazel reached over and tapped my knuckles gently. That's because you were raised to think sacrifice gets you something in return. It doesn't. Not always. I nodded, biting the inside of my cheek. She told me not to come, I said. Said I wasn't aesthetic enough, like I was a scratched vase in the background. Hazel didn't gasp or look shocked. She just exhaled, slowly. She'll regret that one day. But that's not your job to wait for. That sentence stayed with me all day. It's not your job to wait for. I'd spent years waiting. For thank yous, for calls, for birthdays to be remembered, for casseroles to be returned, for signs of appreciation that never came. And still, I made excuses. Cassandra was busy. Olivia was young. They didn't mean to forget. But they did forget. Over and over. Not just events, but the very shape of me. The woman who had wiped noses and paid bills and made sure Olivia had a pink scarf on the first day of kindergarten. I wasn't asking to be a saint. Just seen. Hazel left around noon. She didn't say goodbye with sympathy in her eyes. She just looked at me firmly and said, "Don't clean that bread knife before you eat the rest. It's better a little messy." That made me laugh. That night, I didn't turn on the TV. I sat on the couch with an old embroidery hoop and a half-finished piece I hadn't touched in months. Roses, in soft red thread. I finished one petal, then another. My hands remembered the rhythm, even if my heart was slower to join. At one point, I thought of Olivia again, how her dress shimmered in the sun, how she hadn't even looked toward the tree. But I didn't feel hollow this time. I felt rooted. And I knew I wouldn't be standing behind any more trees. The bank statement came in the mail that Saturday, the way it always did, on thick, off-white paper with a plastic window and a folded summary inside. Most people go paperless these days, but I've always preferred to see numbers printed in ink to hold the truth of things in my hands. I opened it after breakfast, still in my robe, with toast crumbs on the table and the kettle just beginning to cool. The balance hadn't changed much. My savings had grown slowly over the years. Retirement, Charles's pension, the modest investments he made before his heart gave out. Nothing extravagant, but solid. Steady. Like we were. I flipped through the pages. Utility bills, modest grocery charges, a donation to the Historical Society. Then the larger items. Olivia's college application fees, Cassandra's dental surgery last December, a phone bill with a family plan I hadn't used in years, the down payment on Cassandra's condo, quietly drawn from my account in 2 installments under the heading Temporary Support. I remember signing that paper. Cassandra had said, "It's just until I get my bonus, Mom. I'll cover the rest next quarter." She never did. I'd kept quiet. I always kept quiet. Until now. I went to my desk, pulled out the folder marked Legal, and found the document Charles and I had drawn up years ago. Our will, written back when Olivia was small enough to nap on my chest and Cassandra still called me Mommy when she was sick. It was a simple will. Everything to Cassandra, with a stipulation that Olivia receive the lake cottage when she turned 25. I reread it twice. Then I took out a fresh sheet of paper and began a list. What did I still want my name attached to? Who had treated that name with care? It was a short list. The Ridgeview Library went at the top. Hazel was next, not for herself, but for Jada. I remembered she'd once mentioned wanting to be a teacher, but worrying about loans. I made a note about creating a modest educational fund. Not a fortune, but enough to start something. I left a blank line where Cassandra's name used to go. Then I picked up the phone and called Francis North, our old attorney. His secretary answered, cheerful as ever. "Oh, Mrs. Bell," she said when I gave my name. "It's been a while?" "Yes," I said. "And it's time." Francis called me back within an hour. We made an appointment for Monday. I slept better that night than I had in months. In the morning, I made myself real breakfast, not toast, not tea, but eggs and half a grapefruit, the way Charles used to like them. I sat in the kitchen with the curtains open, letting the sun touch the tips of my sleeves. The phone rang around 9. It was Cassandra. "Hey, Mom," she said, voice quick and breezy. "Hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." I knew that tone. It was the tone she used when she was about to pivot into a request. "I'm free," I said. "What's going on?" "Oh, nothing urgent," she said. "Just wanted to check in. Olivia said prom went great. She looked beautiful, didn't she?" "She did," I replied, evenly. Cassandra paused. "I heard you were nearby. Hazel mentioned something about seeing you at the park." I didn't answer right away. "I was there," I said finally, "behind the willow, watching." "Oh." Another pause. "Well, Olivia was just nervous. You know how these kids are. Everything's a production these days. Filters, group shots, blah, blah." I let the silence stretch. Cassandra cleared her throat. "Anyway, I was wondering, just a thought, if you might be able to help with Olivia's summer program deposit. She got into a film workshop in Portland. It's really selective. I thought she wanted to study pre-law. She's exploring." I looked down at the bank statement still open on the table. "I won't be covering that," I said gently. "I think it's time Olivia starts exploring with her own money." There was a long silence on the line. I could hear the shift. Not anger. Not yet. Just confusion. The disbelief of someone who'd never been told no. "Is everything okay, Mom?" Cassandra asked, her voice tighter now. "Everything's fine," I said. "Just realigning things." "I don't understand." "No," I said. "You don't. But one day, maybe you will." I ended the call. Outside, the street was quiet, except for a cardinal flitting from fence post to fence post. The air smelled like something new. The invitation never came. That Friday evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops and the neighborhood grew still, I sat at the kitchen table with a linen napkin folded neatly beside my plate. I'd made myself salmon and steamed green beans, a small ritual for when something formal is happening elsewhere and you are not invited. Olivia's prom banquet was tonight. Cassandra hadn't mentioned it since our last call. No logistics, no offer of a seat at the table, no second-hand apology on Olivia's behalf. Just silence. A wide, knowing silence that left no room for misunderstanding. I wasn't expected, and this time I wasn't going anyway. I lit a candle, not for ambiance, but for clarity. There's something about the way a single flame moves in a quiet room that reminds you of presence, of choice, of the difference between being left out and choosing to step away. I ate slowly, chewing each bite like it deserved the attention. Across from me sat the empty chair where Olivia used to do her homework, where she once spilled grape juice on a math worksheet and cried like it was the end of the world. I'd kept that paper, cleaned and folded, in a drawer for years. I found it last week while reorganizing, looked at it for a moment, then placed it in the recycling bin. That's how it starts, the letting go. Quietly, without ceremony. After dinner, I changed into my house dress and stepped out onto the back porch. The evening was warm, the sky painted in layers of orange and gray. In the distance, someone was mowing their lawn too late, the hum gentle against the birdsong. Hazel's porch light was already on. I could see her silhouette rocking slowly, one hand cradling a cup, the other stroking her cat's back. I raised a hand in greeting. She raised hers back. No words needed. I sat there a long time, long enough for the light to shift and the sounds of the block to settle. Somewhere, far across town, Olivia would be posing again, this time indoors, under chandeliers, surrounded by laughter and silverware. I imagined the scene, long tables, folded napkins, a playlist curated for nostalgia, paper programs with everyone's names, her dress perfect, her smile curated, her grandmother not in the room. They would not say my name. They would not toast me. That too was part of the clarity. At some point, I rose and went back inside. The air in the house had cooled, and I pulled a shawl over my shoulders. In the hallway, the mirror reflected me without flattery, but without cruelty either. I looked like myself, not decorative, not tragic, just intact. In the living room, the clock ticked out its patient rhythm. I sat down and opened my notebook, the one I'd been filling slowly since Charles died. Thoughts, bits of recipes, lines from books, clipped articles. On the last page, I wrote something new. You do not have to be welcome to be whole. You do not have to be seen to be real. Then I closed it, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't check my phone. I didn't expect a call. I didn't expect regret. The chair across from me remained empty, and I let it be. Some absences are a form of peace. It started raining sometime after midnight. Not the polite kind of rain that tiptoes across windows like a guest arriving late, but the thick, steady kind. The kind that soaks the porch cushions and turns the garden path into a ribbon of mud. I heard it before I saw it, lying in bed with the quilt pulled up and the windows cracked for air. The house creaked faintly, as if trying to shift under the weight of the weather. I didn't fall back asleep. Around 2 a.m., I got up and went into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water and stood at the sink, watching the rain darken the pavement. The candle from dinner was still sitting in the dish, its wick curled and stiff. The silence felt different now. Not empty, just full of things I no longer owed anyone. I made tea again, not to drink, just to hold the warmth. My hands had started to ache more lately, joints stiff in the mornings. The weight of the mug helped somehow, a quiet anchor in the storm. I carried it into the living room and sat in the old armchair by the window. The cushion sagged just a bit more than it used to. Charles had always said we should replace it, but we never did. Now, I liked it that way. Around 3:30, headlights passed slowly outside, then paused. The shape of a car, then a door opening. I didn't move. The porch light clicked on. Motion sensor. I heard feet on the gravel, then up the wooden steps. The knock was soft. Just once. I didn't answer. The rain had eased to a whisper, and I could hear the shuffle of someone shifting their weight. A voice. Cassandra's. "Mom?" I stayed still. I wasn't sure if you were awake." No reply from me. She waited a few seconds, then sighed. "We just got back from the banquet. It was fine. A little rushed." I imagined her standing there, damp hair frizzing at the edges, clutching that same handbag she always carried. "Olivia said she thought she saw you at the park. She wasn't sure." Another pause. "She doesn't know what to say, Mom. She's 18. She doesn't even know what she feels half the time." That part sounded rehearsed, like she'd practiced in the car. "I told her we'd come by this week, have dinner maybe. Just the three of us, if you want." She waited. The silence filled every corner of the room. I could hear the soft tick of the kitchen clock behind me. My tea had gone cold. Then, footsteps down the stairs. The porch light clicked off. The car door shut. I didn't move until the taillights were gone. Then I stood up, poured the tea into the sink, and rinsed the cup. Wiped the counter. Turned off the kitchen light. Back in the hallway, I saw the outline of the wet welcome mat. Darker now, edges curling. I left it. The next morning, I sat on the porch, wrapped in my shawl, and watched the light creep across the trees. The air smelled like wet soil and spent flowers. At some point, Hazel walked by with her umbrella and gave me a quiet nod. She didn't ask who knocked. She didn't need to. There are visits that come too late and words that don't belong to the moment they arrive in. Some things, once broken, stay broken. Not out of spite, but out of peace. I called the notary on Monday morning. His office hadn't changed much since Charles and I first walked in 17 years ago, when we updated our will after Cassandra's divorce. Same dusty blinds, same framed certificate from 1983 hanging slightly crooked above the desk. His assistant recognized my voice immediately and offered me an appointment for the next day. I accepted without hesitation. Tuesday came clear and cool, the kind of morning that feels new even when nothing else has changed. I dressed with care. Charcoal skirt, soft cream blouse, the cardigan I only wore when I wanted to feel solid. I didn't bring the old will. I knew what needed to be said. The receptionist smiled gently when I arrived. "Mrs. Bell," she said, "Mr. Kendall is ready for you." I followed her into the office. Charles's seat was empty now, but I didn't feel alone. Mr. Kendall rose, extended his hand, and gestured for me to sit. He wore the same glasses, the same careful expression. He looked at me a moment longer than expected, as if registering the change before saying a word. "I'd like to update my documents," I said calmly. "I'm removing my daughter as sole beneficiary. I want to set up a trust." He didn't blink, just nodded once and opened a fresh folder. "Of course. Would you like to discuss the reasoning or go straight to the structure?" "Let's go straight." And we did. It took 2 hours. I asked for 2 separate trusts, one in the name of Ridgeview Community Library, the other in Hazel's name, to be administered as educational support for a young woman of her choosing. No conditions. No approval needed from me or my estate. "And your granddaughter?" Mr. Kendall asked, his tone neutral. "She's not to be included," I said. "Not for now." He made the note without comment. By noon, the paperwork was drafted. I signed it all without shaking. When he handed me the final copy, I slid it carefully into my bag and stood. "Thank you," I said, meeting his eyes. "I needed this done without emotion." "You did it with precision," he replied. Walking out of that office, I felt a strange lightness, not joy, not triumph, but space. A room inside me that had been cluttered for years was now empty. I could walk through it, breathe in it. I stopped by the bakery on my way home and bought a single cinnamon roll. Sat on a bench outside, tore it in half, and ate it slowly with a plastic fork. There were children across the street playing near the fountain. One of them, a girl with a crooked braid, reminded me of Olivia years ago when we used to come downtown just to feed the ducks and get a cookie. I watched her for a minute. She laughed at something, and her braid slipped over her shoulder. Her grandmother, I assumed, sat on a nearby bench, watching too. Present. Visible. That had been me once. But this time, I wasn't sad. The cinnamon roll was warm, the breeze soft. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like something had been taken from me. I had done something clean, something final. That evening, I called the library. Mrs. Penner picked up. "I dropped off the check yesterday," I said. I wanted to follow up and say, "It's official. The scholarship is being created." "Oh, Mrs. Bell," she said, "you have no idea how much this will mean." "I think I do," I said. She paused. "Can we put your name on it?" "No," I replied. "Call it the Quiet Work Fund. That's enough." There was silence on the other end, then a soft, "It's perfect." We hung up, and I sat for a long time with the phone still in my hand, listening to the click of the clock in the next room. Let them think what they want, I thought. Let them invent their stories about money or motives or hurt feelings. I had made a choice, and I didn't owe anyone a footnote. Dear Olivia, I wasn't sure whether to write this. At first, I thought silence might speak louder. But then I remembered. Silence leaves room for misunderstanding. And I'd rather you hear the truth from me. So I'm writing, not as a grandmother asking for your affection, but as a woman explaining her boundary. I saw you at the park that day. You didn't know I was there, though maybe later someone mentioned it. I stood behind the willow tree. It used to be your favorite place once upon a time, the place where you said the fairies lived and where we had our picnics with apples and peanut butter. That same willow became the only place I could go without spoiling your pictures. You said I wasn't aesthetic enough, not with cruelty perhaps, just carelessness. But sometimes, careless things are sharper than intentional ones. I don't bring this up to shame you. You're young. The world has filled your head with images of perfection, of sleek lines and curated smiles. It's not entirely your fault that you believed it, but I want you to know what it cost. That day, I wore the lilac dress I'd bought just for you. I'd had my hair done. I wore the earrings your grandfather gave me on our 35th anniversary. I stood under that tree while you posed, while you smiled, while your life moved forward without me in the frame. You might say it wasn't personal, but it was. Because I have spent years holding your life together in the small, invisible ways. Checking your mother's bills, co-signing the lease, wiring tuition payments. I did these things without fanfare, without asking for anything but kindness in return. Not applause, not grand gestures, just kindness. Instead, I received distance, and then silence, and finally, dismissal. You are not the first person to forget the hands that held you, but it doesn't mean those hands owe you more than they've already given. I'm writing now to tell you that I will no longer be part of things I'm not wanted in. I will no longer stand behind trees to witness my own absence. I've made some changes, legally and otherwise. I don't feel the need to list them here, not out of secrecy, but because they're not for you to contest. They are simply the shape of my decision. I hope your life is full of joy, Olivia. Real joy. Not the kind that shows well in photos, but the kind that stays in your bones. I hope one day you understand that the people who show up quietly without needing to be seen are the ones who hold the world together. And if that day comes, if you look back and feel something resembling remorse, you don't have to find me. Just remember me. That will be enough. M. The banquet hall smelled like roses and rented linen. Glassware clinked, laughter floated from table to table, and the low hum of a jazz quartet filled the background like a pleasant distraction. Everyone looked polished, and a little exhausted from smiling. Olivia sat at the center of it all, her dress perfectly steamed, her makeup still holding despite the heat of the crowded room. Around her, friends leaned in for selfies, their voices rising in sudden bursts of cheer. Her phone buzzed with tags and filtered photos, but her eyes kept drifting to the empty seat beside her mother. "Maybe she's running late," Cassandra had said earlier, trying not to sound irritated. "She's not coming," Olivia replied quietly. Cassandra frowned. "Did she say that?" Olivia shook her head. "She doesn't have to." There had been a knock on the door that morning. A courier with a cream-colored envelope, unmarked except for Olivia's name in the center, written in soft, looping script. No return address. No note from a delivery service. Olivia had slipped it into her purse and said nothing. Now, halfway through the dinner service, she excused herself and stepped outside into the lobby, where the air was cooler and the noise less relentless. She found a bench near the hallway and pulled the envelope from her bag. It wasn't heavy, just a folded card inside. When she opened it, a single pressed pansy fell into her lap. The kind her grandmother used to grow by the back fence. The ones Olivia picked without asking and kept in books she never finished. She picked up the flower, stared at it, then unfolded the card. There was no salutation, just handwriting she knew by heart. "You do not have to be welcome to be whole. You do not have to be seen to be real. But when people push you from their tables, they should not expect you to keep setting their plates." Olivia read it once, then again. She sat still for a long time. The laughter from the hall carried through the double doors. A waiter passed by with a tray of wine glasses and offered her a kind smile. She didn't smile back. When she returned to her table, the music had shifted. Someone gave a toast. Olivia raised her glass and drank, but her hand trembled slightly. Later, when the cake came out and someone shouted for group pictures, she excused herself again and walked to the far end of the hall. She pulled out her phone and tapped through contacts, paused on the name, Grandma. Her thumb hovered, but she didn't press it. Instead, she scrolled up to old messages. Ones that mentioned doctor appointments, weather reports, a new blueberry pie recipe. Nothing dramatic, just presence. Persistent, reliable presence. She hadn't answered most of them. A tap on her shoulder pulled her back. Her friend Callie smiled, holding up her phone. "Liv, come on. One more group shot before everyone disappears." Olivia nodded and followed. But her smile didn't quite reach her eyes this time. And that envelope, cream, quiet, final, stayed in her purse all night, untouched but impossible to forget. She came the next afternoon. Cassandra didn't call, didn't text, just appeared at the porch in her white blazer and oversized sunglasses, like a woman on her way to a brunch that had been double booked. I saw her through the window, standing stiffly, phone clutched like a weapon, already half annoyed, half rehearsing. I opened the door before she could knock. "Mom," she said, trying to sound light. "Can we talk?" "You're here," I replied. "So, talk." She stepped inside like someone entering a stranger's house, eyes scanning the furniture, the dustless corners, the stillness she didn't understand anymore. "You could have said something," she began, setting her bag on the armrest like she might only be staying a minute. "You could have picked up when I called." "I wasn't in the mood to be persuaded," I said, walking toward the kitchen. "Tea?" She blinked. "What?" "I'm making tea. You'll want something hot for this." I didn't wait for her answer. I boiled water, set out 2 mugs, and spooned the loose leaves into my old ceramic pot. I could feel her shifting behind me, that impatient energy of hers, the tapping fingers, the way she inhaled when she was gearing up to say something rehearsed. "I don't know what's going on with you lately," she said finally, "but this withdrawal, this silence, the passive-aggressive letters, it's not healthy. It's not fair." I placed the mugs on the table, sat down, and looked her in the eye. "I am done being fair in only one direction." Cassandra frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I have nothing left to prove, and no one left to prove it to." She exhaled, clearly irritated. "This is about Olivia, isn't it? The park, the photos. She told me what happened. She's sorry, Mom. She's young." I shook my head. "She's young. You're not." I'm not angry," I said. "But I am finished." She stared at me, confused. "Finished with what?" "With all of it. The quiet pretending, the silent funding, the version of family where I pay for everything, but get seated behind a tree." Cassandra flinched just slightly. "I was there, Cassandra. I saw her turn away. I heard my own name not being said. She didn't mean it like that. Doesn't matter how she meant it. It's what she did." Cassandra folded her arms. "So that's it? You're cutting us off? After everything I've done for you?" That part made me laugh softly. "Everything you've done for me. Cassandra, you've used my home, my accounts, my time, my name. You've used me. Kindly, perhaps, but thoroughly. I've never asked you for anything that wasn't convenient for you," I finished. "And now that I've stopped saying yes, you're calling it betrayal." The kettle hissed softly behind us. I poured the tea, my hands steady. "I've changed the will," I said. She blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." Her voice dropped, sharp and low. "You don't get to punish us because you're feeling lonely. This isn't punishment. It's boundary." Cassandra stood up, pacing now. "So what? You're giving it to charity? To strangers?" I didn't answer. I sipped my tea. She stopped pacing. "And Olivia? You're just cutting her out?" "No, I'm letting her go." Cassandra stared at me, the realization finally setting in that she wouldn't be able to cry or guilt or argue her way through this one, that something in me, something soft and patient, had finally hardened. Not from anger, but from clarity. "I don't recognize you," she said. "You never tried to," I replied. The room fell quiet, just the sound of the clock and the slow drip of rain outside. Cassandra picked up her bag. "Well, I hope you enjoy your solitude." "I already do." She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the knob. I didn't rise to follow her. At the threshold, she turned. "You'll regret this. One day when no one calls, when no one visits." I interrupted her gently. "You think silence is something new to me." She said nothing, just closed the door behind her. I sat at the table a while longer, letting the tea cool. The cup warmed my palms. The space around me was quiet, but it wasn't empty. Not anymore. I hadn't been to the cinema in over a decade. Not because I didn't want to, but because it always seemed like a luxury I needed to explain. I told myself movies were for couples or children or groups of friends planning weekends, not for women like me with shopping lists in their purses and grandchildren in their phones. But that Thursday, I woke up to a sky washed clean by last night's storm, and I didn't ask anyone's permission to enjoy it. I put on my softest dress. The blue one with the faint floral print that Charles always said made my eyes look clear, and a light cardigan, just in case the theater was cold. I took the bus downtown. I walked slowly. No destination beyond the simple truth. Today was mine. At the box office, I chose the 11:45 matinee. A quiet drama. Nothing loud, nothing too clever. Just a story. And I was ready to sit still and let it unfold. There were only 6 of us in the room. 2 women my age, a young couple holding hands, and 1 man in the far back with a newspaper folded under his arm. No one talked during the previews. No one crunched popcorn too loudly. It felt like a prayer, that kind of hush. The movie was quiet, too. About a woman who loses her shop and finds herself growing tomatoes in her father's old garden. There wasn't much plot, but there were scenes of her hands in the dirt, of tea cooling on windowsills, of letters half written and finally mailed. I found myself blinking too much halfway through. When it ended, no one clapped. We just sat there for a moment, as if adjusting back to gravity. Outside, the air was warm. I walked to the cafe around the corner and ordered a cappuccino. I hadn't had one in years. Not since Cassandra told me it was a waste of calories and brought me those powdered shakes instead. The foam was perfect. A little heart in the middle. I took a seat by the window. I watched people pass. A woman dragging a toddler in rain boots, a man adjusting his tie in the reflection of a parked car. Life moved around me. Not for me, not against me. Just around. And I was part of it again. Later, I wandered through the little bookstore near the bus stop. I used to take Olivia there on weekends. She'd race straight to the children's corner, curl up under the frog-shaped beanbag, and pull 5 books at once into her lap. I bought her a bookmark once that said, "Wild About Words." She lost it the same week. I walked through the poetry section now, not looking for anything in particular. My fingers drifted across spines, familiar names, quiet voices. I picked one almost at random, a slim collection by a woman I'd never heard of. The cover was blue. That was enough. I paid in cash. On the way home, I sat by the window on the bus. The same roads, the same buildings. But I noticed the flower boxes on the library windows, the way the wind made the flags flutter outside the fire station. Things I'd stopped seeing when my days were spent looking down, or back. When I got home, the answering machine was blinking. One message. It was Olivia. "Hi, Grandma. I just wanted to say I got your letter. And the flower. I kept the card. I guess I just wanted to say thank you. For everything, that's all." She didn't ask me to call back. She didn't offer a time to meet. Just left her voice, unsure and quiet. I listened once, then deleted it. Not from cruelty, just from certainty. That evening, I ate leftover soup, read a chapter from my new book, and turned in early. Not because I was tired, but because I wanted to wake early and see the day begin again. There was no noise in the house, only space. And finally, it felt like it belonged to me. I started sitting on the front porch again. For years, I'd stayed in the back, out of habit, out of politeness, out of something harder to name. The back porch was where I could knit without interruption, where the neighborhood's messiness didn't demand my witness. It was safer there, smaller. But now, each morning, I carried my mug of tea to the old wooden rocker out front. The one Charles had painted twice. The one Olivia used to climb on with bare knees and sticky hands. It creaked louder than I remembered. But it held. From the porch, I saw everything. The paper boy, now a grown young man, who still tossed the paper with a perfect flick of the wrist. The Hendersons' new puppy, who barked at dandelions. Hazel, coming back from her morning walk with a tote bag full of celery and good gossip. Sometimes she waved. Sometimes she just nodded, both of us knowing that some days words are unnecessary. I wasn't watching the world for distraction anymore. I was watching because I was in it. I'd begun tending to the garden again, too, not because it needed to be impressive, but because it was mine. I trimmed the dead hydrangeas, pulled weeds, and even bought 2 bags of mulch without waiting for someone's help. I didn't lift them all at once, just enough for one day, then another, then another. The rhythm felt honest. Inside, I moved the framed photos, not out of bitterness, just order. I placed Charles's wedding photo by the bookshelf, where the afternoon light hit it softly. I packed away Olivia's baby pictures and left only one, the one where she's holding a book with her head tilted, utterly focused. That's how I like to remember her. In the kitchen, I cleared a drawer, the one filled with expired coupons, pens that no longer wrote, battery packs for phones I no longer owned. I found old notes in Cassandra's handwriting, grocery lists, a scribbled back by 8 from a decade ago. I didn't linger. I threw them out. The space felt lighter after that. I also started saying no out loud. Not to anyone in particular. Just in practice. Standing at the mirror. Folding towels. Cooking dinner for one. I'd whisper it. No. Sometimes I said it softly. Sometimes firm. It always felt new. I stopped buying things I didn't enjoy. The flavorless crackers Cassandra said were better for my cholesterol. The magazines with glossy kitchens and silent wives. I bought the ones with crosswords, recipes that used butter, and stories written in small, careful voices. At the library, Mrs. Penner called me by name now when I walked in. She'd smile and ask if I wanted to see the progress on the scholarship flyers. I told her not yet. Let the seed grow before I start picking flowers. She understood. Once, as I was leaving, a teenage girl held the door for me. She wore headphones and chipped nail polish. As I passed, she said, "I love your brooch." I touched the pin, a small gold rose Charles had given me in '86, and smiled. "Thank you," I said. She smiled back. Just for a second. Then she walked away. The rest of the day, I thought about how kind that moment felt. Small, but unprompted. Real. No one asked me if I wanted to come to brunch anymore, or to pose for photos, or to fund another course change. But people did ask about my garden, my books. Hazel asked if I'd come to her niece's piano recital. I said yes. Brought lemon bars. One afternoon, I found myself humming while I swept the porch. Just a tune. Nothing I recognized. My own sound. That was the strangest thing, how unfamiliar I'd become to myself, and how welcome that unfamiliarity felt. I hadn't expected joy, but something close to it began visiting in small moments. And each time it came, I made a little more space. It was a Saturday, the kind with slow-moving clouds and the smell of cut grass hanging in the air. I was in the front yard, pulling up wild onion bulbs along the fence line, when I heard a car door shut. Not the quick slam of someone with errands to run, but that uncertain kind. The one people use when they're not sure they should have come at all. I stood up, wiping dirt from my gloves. Olivia. She was thinner than I remembered. Not unhealthy, just sharpened. Her hair was tied back, her dress wrinkled in the places you only notice when you've been sitting in silence for a while. She held a paper bag in both hands, like something fragile might be inside. She didn't speak right away. Just stood on the sidewalk, eyes flicking to the porch, to the grass, to my face. "Hi, Grandma," she said. I nodded. "Hi." A pause. I brought muffins. From that bakery you liked. Hazel told me the name. I looked at the bag. Thank you. She stepped forward, cautiously, like the ground might shift. I gestured toward the porch. You can sit, if you want. We didn't hug. I went to the hose and rinsed my hands. Took my time. Let her settle into the wooden chair that creaked a little under her weight. She crossed her legs, uncrossed them, looked down at her nails, then at me. You look good, she offered. I nodded again. So do you. The wind picked up slightly, shifting the hem of her dress. A bird landed on the banister, peered at us, then flew off. I read your letter, she said, not looking at me. A few times. I didn't answer. She took a breath, like she was about to speak again, then stopped. I didn't know what to say, she said finally. I didn't ask you to. She looked at me then, really looked, and I saw it. Not regret, not apology, not some dramatic reckoning, just a quiet question in her face. Are you still mine? I didn't have an answer, but I sat beside her. We didn't speak for a while, just listened to the street. A dog barking 2 houses down, a bike bell, wind in the trees. She opened the bag and placed the muffins between us on the little table. Do you want the blueberry? She asked. It used to be your favorite. I took it without a word, broke it in half, handed her a piece. We ate in silence. The crumbs fell softly onto our laps, unnoticed, and it felt, for one moment, like something true. Not whole, not mended, but present. She didn't ask if she could come again. I didn't invite her. But when she stood to leave, she reached out and touched my shoulder. Lightly. That was all. And it was enough for now. Summer came without ceremony. One day, I was sweeping petals off the porch from the last of the spring blossoms, and the next, the air had changed. Thicker, slower, full of bees and the scent of warm earth. I didn't mark the transition. I simply began moving through the days as they came, not chasing anything behind or ahead. There was peace in that. The garden bloomed beyond my expectations. The tomatoes came early, fat and red, heavy on the vine. The lavender I'd nearly given up on after last year's frost returned, brighter somehow, defiantly purple. Hazel said it was the best she'd ever seen it. You've been feeding things differently, she observed one morning, watering can in hand. I smiled. Maybe I have. Jada came by once, on her way to the library. She asked if I'd help her stitch a hem for a scholarship interview dress. I said yes, of course. She sat at my kitchen table while I guided the needle through soft cotton, and when she left, she said, I hope I grow into your kind of quiet. I didn't reply, just touched her hand and nodded. The compliment didn't need correcting. Cassandra didn't come back. She sent a birthday card, late, unsigned, except for us. Inside was a gift card to a department store I never shop at. I tucked it in a drawer with other things I no longer feel obligated to use. Olivia sent one postcard, a photograph of a rocky shoreline, probably from a road trip with friends. On the back, in small, careful writing, the waves remind me of your stories. I listen better now. She didn't sign her name. She didn't need to. I put it on the fridge, next to a magnet shaped like a teacup. No more photos were taken of me that summer, but I felt more seen than I had in years. Some evenings, I would sit on the porch and watch the light shift over the neighbor's roof. I started writing again, not letters, not notes, just small pages of memory, bits of sentences that I didn't plan to share. I wrote about how Charles used to whistle while fixing the sink. about the exact sound of the floorboard in front of Olivia's old room, about the night I stopped setting the table for 3. It felt like sweeping the corners of a house before locking the door. Not out of sorrow, just care. I didn't expect reconciliation anymore. I didn't wait for recognition. What I carried now was different, quieter, and heavier in the right way. A kind of rootedness I'd mistaken for years as loneliness. It was not loneliness. It was living on my own terms. One Sunday, Hazel and I went to the farmer's market. We split a peach pie and sat on a bench watching children play with chalk. One little girl drew a sun with a crooked smile and said, "I made it for the old ladies." We laughed, not because of the name, but because it had no sting. At home, the afternoon light bent low across my living room floor, and I thought, this is what it means to be steady, to have left nothing unsaid, to let go without bitterness, to be a woman who once stood behind the tree and now stands simply where she pleases. And if you've read this far, if this story settled somewhere behind your ribs, let me ask you something gentle. Don't forget the ones who showed up for you quietly. Don't wait until they leave the frame to wonder where they stood. And if you've ever been told you're not aesthetic enough, come sit next to me. We see better from here. If this moved you, share it. Let someone else feel less alone.